Welcome to the Kiwi Adviser Network Podcast. I'm the host, Warwick Slow, and this is a podcast for financial advisors in New Zealand, focusing in the mortgage, insurance, and KiwiSaver space. We're going to be chatting to some of the key players in the New Zealand market to help grow the industry as a whole. We promise it'll be more entertaining than doing the course strand. The first episode is with the CEO and founder of the Mortgage Lab, Rupert Gough. Thanks for joining us. Let's go. Rupert started the Mortgage Lab in 2017, trying to solve a challenge that a lot of solo advisors face where you don't have the same resources that a large organisation would have. He is also the practitioner director for lending at Financial Advice New Zealand, as well as creating, I think, an amazing catalogue of online content. But you got like a podcast, you got a YouTube series with around about 1,000 subscribers.
We're getting there, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, almost 1,000.
And you've also gone and written a bloody book, The Successful First Home Buyer.
Yeah.
I don't know where you find the time.
Late nights.
Late nights
is the key to it. Red Bull and late nights. Yeah.
That's amazing. And you started it in 2017, so you've come along 5 years now.
5-year birthday last month.
It's incredible. Like I know a lot of people in business, they overestimate what they can do in a year, but then underestimate what they can do in 10.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, statistically, we're a viable business now, according to statistics. I think, what is it, 80% of businesses go under in 3 years.
Well, well done.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, the future's unwritten, but it's been a really interesting journey, right? From me on March 1st, 2017 to today.
Right.
So it's but we can chat about that more. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, maybe a good place to start would be, if you look back in these 5 years now, like what would you tell your early self? Yeah, what advice would you give?
Look, I think I always had the model of what I wanted Mortgage Lab to be, which was a large company, so many advisors, whatever number that is, and we've grown into that. There's obviously been hurdles along the way with pandemics and things like that. This pandemic thing, which no one's heard of, and occasional business issues, but I think what I viewed the business to be then is pretty much what it's become, right? And the size issues that come along when you get to a certain size, like how do you maintain business culture, is all things that I kind of knew were going to be there, but just had to tackle when it became an issue rather than forward planning. So, yeah, I don't know what I'd say to my younger self. I kind of am pleased with where I got to. It was what I hoped for. So yeah.
How do you maintain culture with everybody being remote? So your whole business, in case people didn't know, is do I call it a franchise type agreement, or
it's closer to licensing, I think.
Yeah.
So there's a contract between Mortgage Lab, the entity, and the advisors, limited liability company. And then there's a commission split. So it's probably close to licensing, and that there's no money up front.
Yeah.
Culture's a hard one because it goes slowly. If you've got a good culture, it can deteriorate slowly, and suddenly one day you wake up and it's no longer what you thought it was going to be. So a little bit of it is from me. I have to in spite of things challenging, like the triple CFA, which has been a major challenge for mortgage advisors in New Zealand, you kind of have to maintain a positive note on that. So, here is what the government's trying to achieve by this rule, and they've done it wrong in this case, but this is a good thing for the industry. So that kind of messaging. The other thing that we try and do is we don't really want to pit advisors against each other or silo them. So it's really about each advisor working off other advisors' knowledge. It's a group pool of knowledge that they can use, and then they're kind of reliant on each other's knowledge to go forward. So,
rising tides and all that?
Yeah, totally, yeah. So just about getting them interacting and helping each other and making that a core part of the business is that, you get help from other advisors in the company.
And doing plenty of Zoom quizzes, I'm sure.
We tried Zoom quizzes, but right in the beginning of COVID, we did those things. But I found out I'm a terrible quiz writer.
Oh, wow, okay.
And I'd sort of get this barrage of emails from the advisor being like, oh, that wasn't quite correct, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah, whether I need a professional quiz writer is might be the answer.
It was actually a test, and you passed it.
Good
So well
work.
done.
Yes, you
Bonus
spotted
point.
my deliberate mistake. Several of them. Yeah.
I had to do a similar thing with our company, and it just got to the point where I was like pre-organising was just out the window. So I just had this pub quiz board game that had been given by one of my strange relatives at Christmas, and I just pull out the cards and just start reading them off that way. And I feel like that got the team going.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, COVID was a strange time, eh?
And maybe in a way it might have been a good thing for a business like yours that kind of structures it online.
Yeah.
Having everybody remote. Everybody has to learn how to use Zoom. Like my mum can Zoom me now. I don't have to teach her.
Well, that was the thing, right? Before COVID, before a couple of years ago, if you'd said to a client, let's meet over Zoom, 50% of people would have said, what's that? How do I install that on my computer? Now you can just say, I'm just going to send you the invite. I'll have a video meeting attached to it, and people just kind of do it. So, yeah, I mean, probably a really good example of the culture in the business is that they organised Friday virtual drinks. I didn't do that. They said, hey, this is a good idea. Let's do it. And so people popped on and popped a glass of wine and things, and came and left as they felt appropriate. So yeah, I thought that was really cool that the advisors were doing that themselves and things.
Because you can't force culture. It needs to be.
Come to Friday drinks. Such a great culture.
I'm not going to pay you. Yeah.
Such a great method.
People love being forced into things.
Yeah.
And okay, so if we think back to when you first started Mortgage Lab, it was you were driving from Auckland to Wellington or Wellington to Auckland.
Flying every week. Yeah. Yeah, commuting.
Loving that big commute time.
Yeah.
And I guess, we as humans, we don't get a lot of time to think. We're always distracted. Even when you go to the toilet, you bring your phone with you. It's like all these little things.
There's always a wordle to do.
Yeah. And like sometimes you do your greatest thinking when you're lying in bed at night because that's the only time you don't have distractions. When you think about like bigger picture stuff, like how do you set aside time to do that type of planning?
Yeah, not a very beautiful image, but the shower is quite a good time for. Sorry for all you listeners and viewers out there, but I find that in just running water is kind of zen. So I'm pretty well known for my 45-minute showers. But I do come out of that, and it is, as you say, no one rings you, no one interrupts you. It's kind of nice thing. So. But I also, I get energy at about 10 o'clock at night. It just seems to be when I peak at strategy planning and things like that. I'm not a morning person. So I start work at 9, which is late for self-employed people, I suspect. But I have a break between 6 and 9:30ish. And then I tend to get into that kind of strategy. Again, not many people call you or email you, so it's quite a peak time. But that tends to be when I do that planning. I also make a habit of once every quarter heading away just for one night and just like power planning the business. Yeah, I just tend to get an Airbnb somewhere beautiful, typically Coromandel or somewhere nearby, but because I live in Tauranga, but somewhere I can get away and really just do, like, I work till kind of 3 a.m., 4 a.m., planning everything out, typing everything out. And the poor people that receive my emails, they'll just get a barrage of emails. So I schedule it the next morning.
I was going to say you could schedule it.
But they tend to get a barrage of like, we should do this, kind of fit at 3 a.m. So I do that quite often. I'm a big believer in the 12-week year. So I don't measure my goals yearly. I measure them quarterly, because if you measure them annually, I find that, you get 6 months into it and you're nowhere near doing it. So you kind of bail on it. So quarterly goals is
it's the way to go.
My thing. Yeah.
I remember hearing that Bill Gates, I think he still does this. He'll go away on like a planning or strategy thinking retreat each year with his ex-wife.
Oh, yeah. His just recent ex-wife, or his...
I don't know his whole personal situation, but I just remember reading an article and thinking, can you imagine if your partner was
I'm actually quite good friends with my ex-partners, but yeah.
Okay, she's not going to the Coromandel though, for the record.
She probably wouldn't want to go strategizing. No one wants to go strategizing with me. I'm kind of manic when I do it, so yeah.
You do it alone?
Yeah, totally, yeah.
And are there any good books or resources that you've found useful in your planning?
Do you know what? do you know what Goodreads is? So it's an app where you log in, you log your books, and you can see what your friends are. I think if you follow me on Goodreads, you could pretty much espionage your way into what I'm planning to do in the business, because you'll see what I'm reading, and you'll see what the plans of it are. So sometimes it'll be, like I've got this problem where I feel like the culture in the business is slipping, so I'll read a couple of books. And even if that doesn't provide the answer, it'll get my mind in the mode of thinking about that subject. Reading a lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning at the moment, because I'm kind of keen to see how that works in the industry in terms of, producing diary notes from meeting notes, or, even bank statement scraping software, how we can make that smarter.
That's a big headache for everybody.
Well, hopefully with the Triple CFA getting reviewed, that will be less of a headache. But that is effectively machine learning, right? It's checking the data on a bank statement and trying to categorize that and learn from that categorization. So I'm kind of keen to look at that. So so in answer to your question ages ago, I don't read a particular book, but I'll read a book on the subject I'm trying to improve the business on at the time.
Great. And it's something that we review all the time as well. And like, just go back to team culture, it becomes a challenge as you grow, because, when you start and you've got a few people, it's easy because you're probably all on the same wavelength. But then as the business grows, it becomes a lot more difficult to get everybody on the same page, especially if you're split out around the country. So I know for us, we're kind of slowly migrating back to the office, and even just being together can really help. So
you bounce those ideas off on just a real minute scale as well. So I really think that is a thing to work on.
Because in training and investing in people that you're bringing to the business, it must come at like an enormous cost.
It does. There's not a strict rule that I have, but I prefer new to industry advisors. But we welcome any existing advisors, but there's just a risk that they come with bad habits that you don't know about. So we tend to like to train the advisors from scratch. It's a slower way to grow, but that's our preference. But the training does come with it, and we've learned a lot in the past 5 years about getting advisors to their peak. One of the things that I really try and do, and so this will be true for any advisor that wants to expand their business, wants to grow their business, right, is that you can't. My problem was I was trying to give tools that I would definitely use and ignoring all other tools because I would find these useful. So here they are, and go and use them. And what we've migrated to is kind of here are all the tools. Use what you want. This will suit your personality, and this other person may absolutely hate this tool. I think it's ridiculous. So, and if you think of things like how do you measure how successful you were in a week? And some people, I would use, because I'm a bit retentive, would be the polite way, I would use a time tracking one. So I want to know that I've spent 8 minutes here on accounting and 50 minutes here on strategy. So I use quite an exact time tracking
to
tool.
the minute.
Well, it's not that. You just press stop and then start again in the software, and you say, now I'm working on marketing.
How would you track this time?
Fun,
I'm sure.
Marketing. I don't know. Yeah. Pleasure. But for some people, that is ridiculous. For a lot of people, that's ridiculous. So they might just break it into hourly. I was working on a application that was useful here, and then I was doing some admin here in this hour and things like that. So we try and give as many versions of the tool as we can, and just they can pick it up. And because we're not a salaried model, we're a commission-based model. I'm not the boss. I'm just kind of a mentor that provides things. I can just say, here, use these and use what you want.
Give them the right tools.
Rather than if you're salaried, you're like, this is my process. You damn well use that software, right? So that's why we stayed away from the salary model, because I didn't want that relationship. So.
Yep. Hey, what works for you might not work for others, and vice versa.
And that's probably if someone is looking to expand their business, that is really something to bring along to the thought process is, it's okay that people say, I don't like your business model, I'm going to go elsewhere because it fits me better. Because as long as you stick to your business model and you feel like there's a good ground there, some people will like it. but you don't want to force people who,
square peg in the round hole.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you don't want to, we'll come along and we'll change everything for you, and suddenly you've got several different models going at once. So I've always been a bit okay about people saying, well, that model doesn't work for me. I'm going to go and work for XYZ mortgage brokers, and that's been okay. I've always, or in the beginning, I took a little personally because you're trying to build a business.
Yeah.
But and it's always a good point of reflection. Can I improve the business model to cater for that type of person? But you shouldn't. I wouldn't change it.
Or were they the right fit? You just don't know.
Yeah, totally right. Yeah.
How do you find the right fit? Is there something you look out for, or
there's several stages of our filtering. So I mean, anyone who asks for a salary is not going to fit our model, and is probably not in the financial position to take on a commission-only model. Quite an early indicator of someone who isn't going to fit our model is someone who's looking, asks in the interview process, so how do you provide leads? So we do provide leads to our advisor, but I kind of want someone who's going to go out and network. I don't want someone who's a farmer. So they would fit with other business models who provide them lots of leads and just want to churn through them kind of thing. So a perfect example of that, right? Yeah. So
that's like a nice to have. It's like, I've got this lead. But in reality, you're building out your own book, building out your own business. So.
Yeah. Well, I never wanted to be that person that promised, I'm going to give you as many leads as you like in a week, and then they turn up and they're like, well, I got 3. So,
thank you.
Yeah. So I never promised that, and that's.
Because the other thing is, like you've worked really hard in advisor, you built them into growing into your business and like growing as an advisor. Like, how do you? What's your trick to retaining staff and keeping them, part of the Mortgage Lab brand?
Yeah, I mean, culture is definitely one of them, right? So you want them to be good friends with other advisors, so there's a community there. We always I always felt that there was a number of businesses, they took their 30%, which is what we take, 70-30%, and gave minimal amount there to the advisor and kept the profits. And I always felt that if we could make it so that the thought of leaving Mortgage Lab for another business, they would lose out on so much and the benefits that it wasn't worth them leaving. That was the best kind of business to have because attraction of new staff is the most costly bit, right? And training. So we try and give them as much as possible. I mean, the advisor manual that we've got on our intranet is 152 pages of right from why do banks use mortgage brokers right through to what's a script to use with real estate agents. We've got our PolySense database, which effectively lists all of the policies of the main banks and all of the banks, and so they can compare.
Encyclopedia of
basically. And so if they left Mortgage Lab, if the new company didn't have that, they've got no way of comparing all the banks and things. So we just want it to be as useful as you can, as easy as it can for them to be a mortgage broker.
Just make it so attractive. It's
yeah.
Would you go anywhere else?
And there's we take enough money that we can do that. And
cover overheads. Yeah, of course. When do people hit their peak? Like, how do you keep growing advisors so that they are constantly improving? Like, how do you do training and keeping them on top of things?
Well, we rely a bit on Kiwi Adviser Network, financial, a little plug there. Financial Advice New Zealand. Again, I like to do a bit of internal training because the value that, if a mortgage broker out on their own could get training from Kiwi Adviser Network, so we want additional training in-house that they couldn't get elsewhere. We get lawyers in, we get building inspectors into the staff meeting, just to talk about that general kind of knowledge, so they're as learned as they can when they kind of talk to their clients. We basically just keep that rolling. Yeah.
So let's say, hypothetically, I was like, hey, Rupert, I want to be a mortgage advisor with the Mortgage Lab. What would the journey look like for the first 3 months?
Yeah. So once we've got, let's start from accreditation.
True. Yeah, once you're accredited.
That would be 8 weeks of it.
Yeah.
Sorry, banks, but you are slow on that.
They're doing their due diligence.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So day one, you've got your accreditation. First of all, the first bit of it is a couple of stand-up meetings per week just to keep you enthused, because a lot of those early advisors, they hit the ground and they talk to all their friends and all their network, and then suddenly they're like, I've got no one else to talk to. So we really want them to get over that hurdle of, here's how you go and talk to a real estate agent, here's how you go and talk to an accountant, all those people. What are you doing today to kind of keep that going? At that stage, they should have a couple of applications to submit. And we kind of want them to, so I've got a learning and development manager, Brett, who was actually our first advisor ever to come into the company. He was advisor number one, and he now does his own business and also helps train the staff. So he'll look over how they're going. And because they're on a huge learning curve, right?
It must be crazy. We think about, we always talk about taking somebody from like a 2 out of 10 and like a 7 out of 10 and a few weeks. So it must be.
It's a brutal learning curve. And because they've all just done these kind of level 5 financial certificates, and now they're on learning this new software, and they've got to go and meet their friends or family or network and talk to them about mortgages.
Are you telling me that the course strand's not going to make somebody ready to get out there and do it straight away?
I was ready for something. What? Yeah, jump out of building. It's important. Don't get me wrong. But
it's like university. Somebody does marketing at university. They'll turn up the first day at marketing agency and just whoosh.
Very few people come out of the course strand like amped. But and the other thing about Trail that we use is that they have to go through this residential lending strand, and it's brutal, right? They have to create all the bank statements and they get into the thing. They're like, actually, this whole mortgage thing's quite easy once you start using the right software. So
that's what I did the core strand, and I remember thinking, I've got an unfair advantage here. I can just use the software that we've made to make this really easy.
Yeah. But that's the first. So there's that kind of, how do you keep networking? We've got, we've had a sales course. In fact, we've got second stage of sales course. We've got 2 years of sales course specifically written for Mortgage Lab. Wow. So specifically related to how do mortgage advisors sell, because it's different, right? You don't have to beat them across the head. They're either getting the mortgage or they're not. So how do you work those networks? How do you provide value to those networks? It's quite a different sales approach than a standard, say, salesperson.
Because while sales might be a dirty word, people are saying it's advice, but ultimately you've got to sell yourself so that people trust you enough to do business with you.
It was one thing I was quite bad at when I started, actually. But a lot of people say, and mortgage advisors recognize this, right? Oh, I want to talk to you about interest rates. I want to talk to you about buying a house. And I was like, okay, well, just call me when you're ready. And a month down the track, that have gone to the bank or something like that. And not that they mean ill, they just have forgotten. So I kind of hadn't got to that closing, because I didn't think you needed to close as a mortgage advisor. But in fact, what you need to do is just kind of seal that kind of relationship. So we work a lot on that. Particularly if you're new to industry, you may not have had a whole lot of sales experience and that particular niche sales experience as well.
Are you still on the tools in terms of giving advice?
No, yes.
Very special clients.
Very special clients. I've got my own book that was a legacy book, right, from sort of 5 years ago, that I maintain. So if they want top-ups or they buy a new, friends and family, really.
No, good on you.
Yeah, enough to get me to Rarotonga for commissions every year for that to go. Trip. Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Daddy needs a new
so more and more I'm encouraging the advisors not to ask me questions about mortgages, to work in themselves. So we have a Slack channel, which is, if you don't know Slack, it's kind of WhatsApp.
Teams as well. Yeah. It feels that same void.
We actually send the Teams one, but I suspect it's the same, where they can ask, which bank is doing live deals for new to bank clients at the moment, and another advisor will say, oh, I just got one done at blah 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 blank. And so it's all that group knowledge rather than one person knowing all the stuff. Yeah,
you can saw back from
lifting it
all the questions. Yeah. And what are your thoughts on an advisor maybe finding a particular niche, like maybe they were looking specifically at tradies, for instance? Do you have any training or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's really valuable. There are so many niches that you can do, and it could be culture. If you fit in a particular
maybe an expat or something.
Expat or even if it's sports people or whatever.
Right.
There are so many groups that love to refer in that group. We seem to have been getting a lot of ex-police officers.
Oh,
and
really?
Police officers refer, because there's kind of this bond. They kind of do that. I think that's a great way to do it. Yeah, It's you kind of become this industry and you understand how these people work, right? So tradies want a different type of service to some other form an office worker, right? They want to meet in a different place, they want to meet at a different time. You kind of get how they work. I think that's...
You become the expert and they're like, you got to go to Rupert. He knows.
Yeah. I'm also a big fan of becoming an expert in a particular type of lending, so like second-tier lending. Our advisors do all main bank and all second tier, but I would like at some point to have a specific second non-bank lender kind of thing, because the options are so vast that there's an option there.
Yeah, there's a lot of growth in that market, and I feel that's
certainly the word on the street. It's whether that's temporary or not. Once triple CFA gets reviewed and the kind of ridiculousness gets taken out of it, I wonder whether that buzz might die. There will always be a place for second-tier lenders, don't get me wrong, but whether it is a significant portion of the market, that may be another question.
Do you feel like there is a gap where maybe one of the non-main banks could fill, or there is a void that's being missed at the moment?
Yeah, big time actually. Yeah. What's the word I'm looking for? Like prefabricated homes. There's a problem where a housing company builds a house in a factory and won't release it till it's been paid for, but the bank won't lend on it until it's a bit of a chicken and egg type situation. Right? Yeah. So I reckon a non-bank lender could come in and say, we will fund between the factory and the land, and we will charge a horrendous fee for it, which is fine because you've had it cheaply built. It might be $5,000 for the risk, and that's for about 3 weeks, and while they move to the section. But yeah,
it sounds.
And I can make it sound as easy as I like, and there's probably someone at a non-bank lender being like, that'll never work. What are you talking about? There's so many problems there, but for me that's a real, because we have a housing supply issue, and prefabricated homes seem to be a great way to build a number of homes very quickly, right? And they're good these days. They're not kind of the old style ones.
Some of the ones you see when you're around the coastal areas in New Zealand.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, they are unrecognisable from other homes. Right? So, yeah, but I think Westpac's given it a solid go, but the reason they would say they do it in branches because of how complicated it is. So there's obviously some horrendous stuff in there that they have to deal with in terms of insurance. Who's got liability if it falls off the side of the truck?
True, yeah. Oh. Yeah. So there's all these little things that you never consider.
And that's really worth advisors remembering when the banks come out with some crazy policy, that there is probably 100 things we don't know about going on in the background.
You're like, guys, we're putting well over $1 million on the line for this. We want to make sure it's safe.
We can put a few policies in. Yeah. So yeah, but I do think that's a spot that no one's really touched yet. Yeah.
Can you imagine the rules you'd put in place if one of your mates is like, can I borrow $1 million? I just want to buy a house.
Do you know, I say that so often, eh? People are like, why do I have to give 3 pay slips? I'm like, well, what would you want for $800,000?
I probably want more.
I definitely want more than 3 pay slips, yeah.
I'll be like 90% up front.
3 months bank statements, what a pain. Like, well, hang on. It's $1 million bucks.
Yeah. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So just going back to, like, let's say there was somebody who was looking to grow their business and they've done really well for like the last couple of years and they're at that position where they might be able to expand. Like, what would you say like your main 3 points are for them to look at?
One of my steadfast rules is that all of my advisors are on the same contract. I'm not a big fan of how you can have 80-20. Just don't tell anyone, because that's eventually going to come out. Right? Yeah, exactly. So I can hand on heart say all my advisors can talk about their contracts and everyone is receiving the same thing. And if there's a change, which we did a couple of years ago, we brought in a volume. So once they reach a certain amount of volume, it goes to 90-10 because someone had reached that level or was about to reach that level. So it became relevant for all advisors, right? So you can't have that thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I worry about having those background deals. The second one is I found after 7 advisors, heaps easier. So I know there's a couple of businesses that are like we're running a really good mortgage broking one-man band business. I'll bring on a couple more. And the problem with that is to keep the business going, you need to be on the tools, but training people takes quite an amount of effort, right? Especially in the new process when you haven't got the systems and processes done.
Yeah, just building out that was 152-page document.
Gosh,
like, that alone.
And remember, I didn't get that 152 pages right the first time.
Where did they come from?
That's about the fifth version. So
it was amazing. I went to Wick calls and they just had it right there.
Rupert's book. Yeah, which is right. But when it got to 7, they kind of become a bit, they're interacting, they're finding out things. So if there's a question, it doesn't necessarily come to you. So if you're going to build a business, I'd say go bigger, go 7 to 10. The issue with that is that you'll have 7 to 10 different personalities. So you need to get into that kind of variety of tools quite quickly. You can't just give one tool to the same 7 people.
It's the same with Trail. We build this feature. We think this is going to be great, and a lot of advisors will use it and love it.
Yeah.
And then other times I'll show people in the demo, and they're like,
why would I use that? Yeah. I suspect that's a thing you have to deal with quite a lot.
Just to make it flexible, which sounds like you're doing too.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what my third one would be. Probably one thing that I suffer from is I'm quite an early adopter, and like new things. It's what I liked about Trail when Chuck came in. It seemed like to solve the problem of I could scale my business using the software. But when you've got other advisors, they don't want change a lot. And change fatigue happens really quickly. They're under stress from doing all these applications, and it's getting harder, obviously. So I really have to rein myself. And if you're the type that likes to expand, you're probably the type that has an early adoption.
Loves change.
Yeah.
So
right? Yeah.
I want
to try this feature. So for me, I try it and ask myself the question, is it going to make a material difference to the advisor before I implement it? Then I've got a couple of advisors who are eternally patient with me, who can be my test bunnies, and they can come back and be like, no, that's
sucks,
a stupid
Rupert.
idea. Yeah. So, some of the decisions I had to make, we're on our 4th version of our intranet. And that's quite a big change, right? Because you're used to finding all your data in this place. Suddenly Rupert turns up on Monday and we're getting rid of that, and here's a new one. It's a whole new software.
Frustrating.
But it was for good reason, right? That either one of them was going to charge me $5,000 for what was essentially a website, a terrible website on reflection. But so there's some things that have to change, and if you can convince them it's for the greater good, then that's okay. But if you're the type of person that's expanding, I suspect you like that change, so you might have to rein that in a bit, or test feature it first before you
maybe just shine a light on, with us and how quickly things used to change, but now you've got to follow all these processes because you got to make sure that it's going to be good for everybody.
Yeah.
So how would you you've gone through maybe the first couple of people you've reached out to and gone, okay, they think this is good. How would you get wider adoption for something new, and that's going to be a big change for a lot of the other advisors in the company?
Yeah. So my wife did a bit of change management work, and I learned quite a bit about that. So studying kind of change management is useful. There's I'm going to mess this up if you're in the change management industry. I'm so sorry. But essentially you want to make it compulsory. So you can't just say, if you want this tool, use it. And the way to do that in a business is just remove the old tool, put the new tool in.
The old switcheroo.
Yeah.
The Indiana Jones.
Yeah. But also sell those key benefits on why this is different. Here was the old one, that this is the problem with it. Here is the new one. Here is what it solves and why it will make your life a lot better. That's you've got to get buy-in from them. Otherwise, you're a dictator, and that's key. That's not going to be great.
And even now, as a licensed financial advice provider, you actually have an obligation. Everybody's following those processes, so it's even more important than ever that they're following best practice, which is what you've set out.
Yeah. So that brings up a good thing about the intranet that we're using, right? So the old one was you could kind of search and kind of find the lending guide for ANZ or whatever. This our new one has You can search and you can find it, but it's also got version tracking. So if the FMA comes in and says, show us your processes, we can say, here is the processes. Here's who's looked at that page and when they looked at it. Wow. But also here are our versions. So we're working on it, right? We want to improve, and every 3 months I have to sign off that page is correct. So that was a way better system for us, right? Now, from the advisor's point of view, they don't really care about that. That's, they just want the license to hold. They don't need to know the background of how often I verify a page. But for them, it was they could find this at the page so much easier.
You say intranet. What do you mean by that exactly? Maybe somebody doesn't know.
Probably more of a knowledge base or a wiki. It's just a collection of all our
like
information.
a software tool that stores it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but the question when something goes wrong, which if you've got a business that inevitably will, right? Nothing runs perfectly. FMA comes in and says, show us how you are running this. You want that data to be displayed as easily and as nicely as possible for them. So that's why we chose. We could have just run on a Word document, right? Processes and Control F Word document. To find that. Yeah. 400 pages.
We've also got a paper version.
That's right. Our ream of paper that we send out to everyone. But yeah, we just wanted to provide this information to the compliance people as much as to the advisors in a meaningful way. So.
Yeah, great. Oh man, it's so good to hear that insight, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Cool, thanks.
Anything else you'd like to touch on or to tell the listeners or watchers about?
I think if you are looking to grow your business, now is a good time. It's going to be more and more difficult for one-person companies to be out there on their own in terms of compliance and the change in policies. So now would be a good time to kind of help those advisors and get together. And as I say, there is a number it might be 5 for you or 7 or something, but I think those kind of size companies are a slightly easier way to do it. So if you're looking to do it that way. But yeah, it's still a great industry, right? Like we're still helping people buy houses now more than ever. People need help with their business. It's kind of it's not just to turn up at the branch and here's my pay slips and off you go. So there's definitely a need for that business. So do it if you're looking to expand.
Stop waiting around. Get onto it.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks so much for joining us on the CAM podcast.
Cheers.
It's a pleasure.
Awesome.
Cheers.